Today we're going to look at nesting Ajax responses within multiple layouts and the flexibility we can have in choosing which layouts to use on the fly in case we only want to re-render part of the given page. So today we're going to look at the index action in the CRM status types controller. And that renders this view here. And I've actually created some fake layouts to nest it in. So you can see I've got the actual index view here, and that's nested inside a layout which I just call intermediate container, and that's listed inside another layout called system management. Let's look at the code that makes this work. Let's start with the actual index file. I'm cruising down here to the views folder, CRM, status types, and you'll notice there is no index.js or index.html file here. Where is it? It's up in the application folder because these can be shared by all controllers, because inside them we just refer to variables that are pretty universal. The name index and a couple of parameters which we'll discuss. We make use of a layouts parameter and a container parameter which defaults to main container. Jumping back to the controller, you'll see that I ensure that params container does get set, and it gets set to littler window if it isn't already set in the actual request. So to help test this, I've set up these three buttons which are links. If you look at the bottom of the screen, you can see where they point, and that's a little hard to read, so let's look at the code that generated them. If I can find there we go. That's in this index partial here, which actually is in the status types folder, and it gets called from over here, render index partial. So here are the three buttons, and I'm just calling the same path for all of them, but I'm applying a little query data, and notice that I'm making this layouts object an array. So for the first one, I don't specify any layouts at all, and that means that don't really remember what that means. So let's jump over here. If there is no layouts present, we're just going to render this JavaScript replacement command. And it's not going to replace main container. It's going to replace littler window, because that's what we set right here for params container. Jumping on back, and it's just going to render the index partial with no layouts at all. That's what will happen if we click the index only button. If we click the index plus intermediate button, it should render the same thing, but with a layout wrapped around it. Layout/intermediate container. And if we click the last button, index plus intermediate plus system management top, it will nest index inside of both of these, one inside the other. And we start with the smaller and we move to the larger. You might wonder why I required people to write layout/ in front of all of them, since I use that here. Well, the reason is, if we just assumed layout/ and didn't require people to write it, then we would limit people's ability to put layouts in the actual folder that pertains to the given controller. So go ahead and write out the whole long list there. Alright, let's have a quick look at what's going on here if we click the second button, layouts intermediate container. Jumping back to index. Alright, so then params layout will be present. We'll render the partial index inside the last layout in that params layouts array, which is intermediate container. And that's actually going to happen with a JS format because this request is made in JavaScript. So let me see about finding that layout. I have them stored in the layouts folder. That's what's going to be pulled. You'll notice it's written out like a partial. That's because when you're rendering a partial with an index, a partial with a layout, it's going to look for that underscore initially. So what happens here is we're going to replace some specific div in there, and we're just going to render the HTML version of this same layout, intermediate container, with an HTML format. Make sure you give this block at the end yield so that this layout will be able to, will have the content from the index file. Alright. This is a bit dry, so why don't we go ahead and test some of these things. Alright, if I click index only, you'll see that, bam, just this timestamp was updated because only the bottommost part of this was rendered again. Click it again, same thing happens. If I click index plus intermediate, bam, both of these timestamps get updated. And I'm sending these to the same controller action. I'm just adding a little bit of query data to say use this layout. If I click this one, all three of the timestamps get updated because all three parts were rendered. Let's walk through that last button there just for good measure. So if I click that last button, then layouts will still be present, and the layout that will get popped off of there is, well, let's review, layout / system management. So let's pull up that. It's going to be grabbing the JS one, which asks main container to be replaced using the system management HTML layout. And again, we call yield, we give it that block calling yield inside of it. So let's look at the HTML system management partial. And you'll see inside here, we do a check for params layouts again. If it's present, let's pop off the last one and render it in HTML, again supplying the yield block. And so the next one after we pop off system management will be intermediate controller, and we've already looked at what happens there. So to sum up, when we click that button, it renders index inside of system management, inside of intermediate top. I think this is a pretty manageable way to handle our nested what do you call them, layouts in Ajax. Feel free to look at the code.